Well, happy Monday, everyone, and happy Valentine's Day to everyone. This is Thesha Jenkins with the Harris County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council Connects, where our goal is to connect systems and community members so that survivors of domestic violence can experience greater access to services and safety through collaborative efforts. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us. As you come into the live, if you would say hello, and if you have questions, I want to welcome those. So today is Valentine's Day, and so I know people all across the country are celebrating love. And also want to extend happy Valentine's Day to those who may not be in a relationship, or as the young people would say, that are booed up. Because here's the thing, Valentine's Day should also be about how we love ourselves. And in today's episode, we're going to see the importance of doing that groundwork of learning to love ourselves. February also is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. And so we have an amazing guest with us today to share about how we can recognize teen dating violence, and more importantly, how can we prevent it? Before we bring in our guest, I want to show a clip to you to really drive the point home about why teen dating violence is such an important issue. Because usually when we think about violence in relationships, domestic violence, we tend to think about adults. However, the reality is that there are many teens, I believe approximately about 1 in 4 teens, are in an abusive relationship. And according to the Texas Council on Family Violence in 2020, the youngest casualty of a teen dating violence relationship was 14 years old. So I'm going to show a video, fingers crossed out there in virtual world that this goes off well. So hold on just one moment as we get ready to go and share this with you.
In Southwest Houston, where a teenage girl was gunned down while walking her dog.
As of right now, there have been no arrests. Lauren Talarico is on Park Manor Street where the killing took place.
It really is a horrible story. Diamond Alvarez was killed in this park behind me. Her family heard the gunshots and tried to save her, but they couldn't. And now they want an arrest. This is 15-year-old Diamond Alvarez dancing happily with her mother in their kitchen. Her friends say
she was very kind and loving.
And her stepfather.
Straight A student. The counselors, the teachers, everybody knows her.
Family says the Madison High School sophomore was an athlete who dreamt of becoming a cosmetologist. But that future was stolen last night at about 9:30 as she walked the family dog. Her family heard the gunshots.
So I called my daughter, and she didn't answer.
This is Diamond's mother, Anna Machado.
Right there and then, our dog came in by himself, and that's not normal. I came running, and my son found her. I tried so hard to keep her alive. I couldn't.
She did perform CPR on her daughter, who died right there.
Whoever shot this girl 22 times on the back, they're cowards.
Houston police can't confirm that number of gunshots, and we're still waiting on the report from the medical examiner. But police do say she was shot multiple times. So far, no known motive or suspects. But the family think this might not have been random and say her cell phone had been taken.
Diamond Alvarez, one of many. Please remember her name. And here's the reality is that teen dating violence in relationships can be preventable. And to help us to have this conversation today and give us more insight, we have with us today Dr. Jeff Temple, who is a John Seeley Distinguished Chair in Community Health at UTMB, licensed psychologist and founding director of the Center for Violence Prevention. The focus of prevention on interpersonal, community, and structural violence. Please help me welcome up Dr. Temple.
Thank
Hi,
you so
Dr. Temple.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, and especially for tackling this extremely important and I think underappreciated topic of teen dating violence. And you showed that video of how severe it can get. But it's also some of that little stuff and stuff that happens that maybe doesn't make the news that sets women and girls up for a pattern of unhealthy, violent relationships for the rest of their life. So thank you for bringing this up. Thank you for having me. Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you. And I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. So as they say, we're going to just jump right into this. First of all, so we know that February is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, but like any observance month, October Domestic Violence Awareness Month, February is also Black History Month. Here's the reality is that all these things are 365, 24/7. And so let's just go ahead and dive in and talk about what is teen dating violence and a little bit of what may separate it from domestic violence in adult cases.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll also say that I'm disappointed in myself for not wearing red. I don't know what I was thinking. So dating violence is, when we think of things like domestic violence and dating violence, often we think of physical, and that's extremely important. And it looks very similar to physical adult domestic violence. There's punching, kicking, biting, hair pulling, stomping on, all those types of things that you would think of in terms of dating violence or violence in general. While important, I also think that we have to focus on and think about whether it's adult domestic violence or teen dating violence is psychological abuse, this emotional abuse and verbal abuse. And research shows that actually might be more damaging to girls and women in the long run than is physical violence. And, when you think about it, it makes sense. Being called you're ugly, you're stupid, you're worthless, you're fat, you wouldn't be anyone without me, all the while alienating these teens or adults from their social support network. So now not only are they getting told that they're worthless and being verbally abused, psychologically abused, but they're being stripped away from folks that they would typically go to help deal with that stress. So that's psychological abuse. Then, of course, there's sexual violence and sexual coercion, which I think is what we often see with teens. So about half of teens are going to be sexually coerced by the time they graduate high school. And so this wouldn't necessarily meet the definition of assault, right? This is have sex with me. Why won't you have sex with me? Come on, have sex with me. Everyone else is having sex. If you don't have sex with me, I'm going to tell people you're a whore, or I'm going to share the picture that you sent me with other people. So it's this sort of threatening and that sort of thing. But it happens quite frequently. Of course, sexual dating violence, actual assault, happens quite a bit as well. And so that is forced touching, forced kissing, all the way up to rape. And it's fairly prevalent. I'll talk about the prevalence of all these here in a second. Cyber dating abuse. This is what I think and what others think is not necessarily a distinct form of abuse, that rather it's a vehicle to be victimized or perpetrate the other forms of dating violence. So I already gave an example of how you can maybe like sexually coerce someone with cyber stuff by threatening to share pictures. But it could also be threatening them over text message, if you don't get home by a certain time, or if you don't come see me by a certain time. Or from a psychological standpoint is, hey, I don't believe that you're with your friend that's a girl. Send me a picture to prove that you're with her. Or, if you love me and if you don't have anything to hide, then why don't you share your passwords with me? So that's sort of the idea that cyber abuse is a way to perpetrate or be victimized by the other forms of abuse. There's other things like stalking that we see, and that certainly happens with teen relationships. I think typically it's more of the cyber nature, checking in all the time, just because of the nature of teen relationships where they're not together all the time, and it's difficult for maybe to physically stalk someone. It's common. we know that dating violence of all forms is common. We have continuously shown through the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which is something that's done on tens of thousands of kids every couple of years by the Centers for Disease Control. And what we found is that about 10 to 15% of kids have experienced dating violence in the past year, physical dating violence in the past year. And this has been true for decades. This is not something new. I think now more kids are reporting it. So maybe the reporting is going up, but it's not anything new. It's not increasing. It's always been a problem. Psychological dating abuse is happening quite frequently. There's some studies that have it up to half of people are in psychologically abusive relationships. I don't think that that's really, I think every relationship has some form of emotional and psychological abuse. And thinking about my own relationship, there's probably some stuff that just being in a relationship and conflict that happens both ways. So I hesitate to say that 50% or 80% of kids are in psychologically abusive relationships. I think some of that is figuring out how to be in a relationship. When you get down to more things like severe psychological abuse, consistent, where it's purposeful, it's meaning to control and abuse and alienate, we're probably looking closer to like 25% of our teens are in those relationships. I mentioned the sexual coercion, about half of teens by the time they graduate high school. If you look at assault, it's about 10%, which is, if you stretch that out over the nation, that's millions of kids that are being sexually assaulted. You asked how it looks different from adults. I went over some of that. I'd say another prime example of that is we see a lot more bidirectional violence, so boys to girls and girls to boys. I do want to be clear about something, though, that often people say, well, girls are violent too, so it's not just a female problem. But that's not true. It's who gets hurt, who is psychologically abused, who is sexually abused, who has the long-term effects. It's overwhelmingly girls and women that have that. Now, that being said, and I might get to this later on, I think we do a disservice to girls and women when we ignore their use of violence, even if it's in self-defense, because when we teach and when we talk about communication to girls, to boys, we need to talk about nonviolence in general, because we know that violence begets violence. And one of the strongest, without blaming the victim, one of the strongest predictors of her victimization is her perpetration. And again, not blaming the victim, just saying that we have to do that sorry, I see that you have something to say. I'll shut up.
Because you've got so much information, and but you said a few things that I think that bear with a drill down. So one of the things that you talked about with the verbal and emotional abuse and the impact that it has on girls. So we recognize that being female in this culture carries so many weights, if you will. And how that can then lead to further victimization even into adulthood. So I'd like to kind of do more of just a slight drill down in the time that we have about why that's so important. And then you also talked about the sexual abuse. You talked about coercion. And we at the Harris County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council, we have a Title IX committee. And so recognizing that in middle schools, high schools, and into college, the importance of Title IX, the Campus Save Act, the Clary Act, that we do presentations and provide technical assistance to our local schools and colleges and universities around consent versus coercion. So if you could, that's a lot I know I just asked you about. So let's focus on the consent versus coercion. So that if there is a parent, teacher, or someone who works with youth, about the importance of understanding consent versus coercion.
Yeah, I love that question. I wrote this down. I'm going to take them one at a time. The first one, how does it from this abuse as a teen and how it affects women, especially long term, is, what we see is all physical violence has psychological abuse. There's never been a physically abusive relationship that doesn't have an emotional psychological abuse angle. And why that's important is because what it does is it beats down girls and women's self-efficacy, the ability they think they can be in a healthy, positive relationship. So what happens is that over time, that you start to not believe that you can be in a healthy relationship, and that's why we see a lot of re-victimization and a lot of ending up in bad relationships, even with different partners. So, I think that's important from that side. You also mentioned, how does it, being female in this society, and it's Black History Month, being Black in this society, being a Black female in this society is we used to talk about it being a risk factor, but that is not the right way to think about it. It is the discrimination, the racism, the discrimination, the abuse, the harassment that girls and Black people, and especially girls of color, experience. That is the risk factor, not what they were born with, right? And so there's a bigger hill to climb for all these folks that they're experiencing this as kids, and they're carrying it with them through adults. Last thing you mentioned was Title IX, and I'm so glad you mentioned that. I just did a interview with USA Today a few days ago, where they're looking at how inconsistent it is in its application in middle schools and high schools, and really what it is, where colleges were so bad 20 years ago and how they handled sexual harassment and assault on campus. That's kind of where middle schools and high schools are now. That they're just figuring it out. They don't know, often to no fault of their own, the schools, but they're often not reporting it within 30 days. They're not doing equitable treatment, equitable handling of the investigation. So I'm so glad that is a focus of the Harris County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council. They definitely need it, and consent is extremely important. And it starts early acts, every act. It's expecting kids to hug when they don't want to hug. We should teach them and model permission to touch and consent. I think that would go a huge way. And I'd be remiss, and I'm sorry to take a long time, but unfortunately it sucks and it's not fair, but it seems to always fall on the girls and women and the victims to prevent stuff. And so we have to do a better job. We have to do a better job of talking to our boys and men about not doing bad stuff. But that being said, I think we always have to. I told my daughter when she went off to college, she's a freshman in college, I said, look, it sucks that it's this way, but you have to be the one to prevent it, because society has done such a terrible job of focusing on boys and men. So it sucks that it falls on you, but it does.
So, I told you before we started, our 30 minutes goes by so quickly.
Yeah.
Let's just sit there for about 30 to 60 seconds. Why do you think, based on the work you've done, and we're going to move into the research you've been doing, why is it that prevention falls on women and girls who are predominantly the victims versus male accountability?
I mean, without getting too hippy dippy, we live in a patriarchal society, and so I think up until the last decade or so, I don't even think we really even considered focusing on the perpetrators and the boys and men. I mean, I know there was good programs before that, but at a structural and society level, until things like the Me Too movement, did we even realize or appreciate how important it is to focus on boys and men. So, I think we're playing a lot of catch up now because of the patriarchal society, but I do think we're starting to do a better job on an individual level, on a structural level, on a policy level, to start focusing on perpetration and really, it sounds weird, but helping perpetrators or future perpetrators from not perpetrating.
Right. So let us lead into the program called the Fourth R. Tell us about the Fourth R and the research you've been doing. Share that with our viewers.
Yeah, so Fourth R, it stands for it's reading, writing, arithmetic, and the fourth R being relationships, right? Two of those don't start with R, but we ignore that. So basically what it does is it teaches kids how to be in a relationship. So it's kind of sad if you think about it. We teach kids how to do everything. We teach them athletics, how to dribble a basketball, music, how to play drums, science, art, history, everything. The one thing we don't really teach kids, like, and if I was asked your viewers to raise their hand if they were ever taught how to be in a relationship, I'm guessing none of them would raise their hand. And so we're not taught this basic human skill that if we learn, we would make everything else a lot easier to learn. And so, we learn, kids learn. In fact, if you think about it, the fact that only 25% of kids are in unhealthy, violent relationships, it's kind of surprising when you get to the point that we don't teach kids how to be in a relationship, that it's not even higher. So what this does, Fourth R, is it basically like teaches kids how to apologize to someone, how to break up with someone, how to resolve conflicts in a nonviolent way, how to teach them that conflicts are a normal part of relationships. Conflicts are an expected part of relationships. And so how they learn without being taught is they learn by trial and error, which is fine, but that's where mistakes happen. They learn by the media, which is terrible. They learn by their friends who are equally badly informed as they are. And they learn by their parents, which even well-intentioned parents may not do everything right. So like, if they argue in front of their kids, maybe they don't make up in front of their kids. So the kids don't get to see how they resolve conflicts in a healthy way. So the idea behind Fourth R is to basically replace an existing health class in schools, which a lot of schools have old school health curriculum that are taught by coaches. And coaches would understandably rather be coaching and not teaching. So what the Fourth R does is it gives a contemporary model for these health teachers to basically go through and role play, which is a huge part of Fourth R. The reason a lot of prevention programs don't work is because they're didactic in nature and they talk to the kids. And Fourth R and other successful programs, they talk with the kids and work things out, role play things out, so that when they get into these behaviors in real life, they've already practiced how to do it in a healthy way. And so they're more likely to generalize those skills to the real life environment. The other thing I really like about Fourth R is that it's universal in nature. So it reaches all the kids in a particular like school or grade. And why that's important is because we don't have to like take the at-risk kids or the high-risk kids and put them together. And it's really a dumb idea to put quote unquote bad kids with other bad kids, because all that does is make them badder, right? I mean, it's the whole idea of like alternative school is really backwards. We should.
Let me add something.
Yeah,
there,
please.
Dr. Temple, because I know that we do a lot of focusing on at-risk communities. However, my belief, and after doing this work for almost 27 years, is that domestic violence, dating violence can happen to the individual who is in a family where the median income is $20,000 receiving TANF, but it also lends itself to our gated communities and our physicians, teachers, attorneys. And so I love that and saying that we're going to teach this Fourth R to all students, because regardless of where they end up in life, they're going to be in a relationship. So
I love it. And so that's exactly right. And that's my next point is so this way you don't miss any of those kids by focusing on the high risk kids, which also happen to be, who's picking these high risk kids. It's we live in a patriarchal white supremacist society. And so who gets picked for these is at risk, and you miss a lot of kids. The other part about it that I'm glad you mentioned is everyone's going to be in a relationship. So let's not just teach kids how to avoid bad relationships, how to avoid unhealthy relationships. Let's teach kids how to be in a happy, healthy relationship. So it's not just about avoiding bad stuff, but let's create good, healthy, happy relationships, sexually positive relationships.
Allison Vogt, who is our outgoing board president, she has a really great question here. Is the curriculum available to homeschool kids?
Yeah, nice seeing you on here, Allison. No, but it should be. And I think that's an excellent, and I say no, I mean, yes, it can be, especially if you have homeschool communities. Individually homeschooled kids, it's a little bit more difficult because of the role play activity, but I don't see why we can't create an electronic world of homeschooled kids and approach it that way. And it's something that my colleagues, Dr. Wood, Leela Wood, and I have been talking about, is making this more technology friendly so that we can reach homeschool kids, that we can also reach, a lot of these health classes in middle school and high school are now offered online or hybrid, so that we can now reach those school districts, those schools that have that option. So thank you for that question, Allison.
Love that. Love that. Well, we've got 5 minutes left. As I told you, the time.
Let's just go all day. Let's do it. Let's just keep going.
So the final question that I wanted to ask you is, I think we can talk about what the quote unquote problem is. However, I believe that you do the work that you do because you want to provide solutions. So as we begin to round out this conversation, share 3 things that adults can do to support healthy relationships and prevent teen dating violence.
Yeah, really, my answer to this, and I get asked this a lot, is I'm gonna say 3 things, but the really most important thing, the only thing that really matters, is to model healthy relationship skills. So, if kids have this in their life, whether it is someone at school, a teacher, a staff member, a administrator, the cafeteria person, the janitor, it doesn't matter. If we could reach them and teach them healthy relationship skills, that's huge, because what is the most important thing is that if kids have a pro-social, appropriate model on how relationships are to be handled. This goes, so if we teach, whether it's at home or school or both hopefully, but if we have this at school, then they can see what a healthy relationship is supposed to look like, and they can model that. So that, in and of everything else, the most important thing that we can do as human beings is be nice people, have healthy relationships. It's when you go to dinner and you're nice to the waiter, your kids see that and they remember that. If something's on the ground, pick it up. It doesn't matter if it's not your trash. Kids see that. We have to model this healthy behavior. That's the most important thing. The other thing that's related to that is we got to teach kids how to seek help. Who is a trusted resource? So that way, if it's themselves or if it's a friend of theirs, they can say, how do you go about seeking help? Because they often don't come to us, unfortunately. They go to their friends. So if we could teach them how to seek help, what it looks like, who a trusted source is. And then lastly, look out for symptoms. It's not going to come out, because they're not going to come to us. They're not going to say, I'm in a violent relationship. They're not going to do that for many reasons. One is, if they say that, then the dad's probably not going to let them go on another date, or the mom, or, anything like that. So, it's about looking for other symptoms, the way stress might manifest. So it might be the kids not doing things they used to do, not enjoying, not hanging out with other friends, other people aside from their partner. Typical things: sleeping less, sleeping more, eating less, eating more. That sort of thing is what you need to look out for. And it might not be that they're in a violent relationship, but they're experiencing some form of stress that we need to ask them about.
Okay, awesome. I got 2 more questions, and see if we can get them in the next 2 to 3 minutes.
We can do it.
So one of the things that the council is embarking on or launching is we are going to be starting a campaign next month that will flow through October, that is to help shed some light on domestic violence and the intersections of criminal justice. And when you talked about teaching our young people how to seek help, what has been your experience in doing this work on, do young people reach out to our criminal justice system?
No, they don't. But they often end up there. And most kids that end up in the criminal justice system, 99.999%, are going to be, back in the community. And so I think that is an ideal opportunity to reach those kids and to teach folks in the criminal justice system healthy relationship skills. And so I think it's a prime opportunity that we can teach these types of skills.
Wow. So what would you say, just why do you think they're not contacting criminal justice? It may be the same reason adults don't, but again, based on your research.
I think it's some do. I shouldn't say no, they don't, and some do. I would say one is that maybe it's often not seen as a problem or something that warrants that involvement. It could be that they see this abusive behavior as this is a form of love, that he loves me so much he doesn't want me to see anyone else, or think of. So it could be all those sort of factors. It is also just, it's sometimes we don't think of police as, or criminal justice as a way to support, as opposed to just a punishment. And then there is a lot of people that have real fear of the criminal justice system, that they have a history of not being treated well, mainly, people of color, and women are often not believed when it comes to this. So, I think there's a lot of real stuff, real concerns, and then a lot of just the dating violence looks a lot different, and they just typically don't go to adults, generally speaking.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. We definitely have a lot of work to do, but thank you for the work that you are doing, the work that also that you are doing with Dr. Wood, because definitely, just as we have to continue to raise awareness that domestic violence is a crime, not a personal issue,
Yep.
that we have to also up the ante and amplify that message with our younger people as well.
Yep.
So leave us some closing thoughts as we wrap up.
My closing thoughts are, thank you so much for all that y'all are doing. I mean, you guys are on the front lines. Actually, I'm trying not to say you guys, I'm trying to be better. Y'all are on the front lines doing the real work. Thank you, seriously, from the bottom of my heart. Y'all are making a difference with our teens and adults and women. And thank you for everything that y'all do. And thank you for having me.
Awesome. And if people wanted to contact you or your team about the 4th R, how do they get in contact with you or your team?
Yeah, just search. Our website is utmb.edu/CVP, as in Center for Violence Prevention. We can also be emailed at violenceprevention@utmb.edu.
Okay, awesome. And I believe that Rebecca, our wonderful social media director, captured that, so that should be coming up.
Awesome. Well, also follow me on Twitter at Dr. Jeff Temple.
All right. So please follow Dr. Temple on Twitter. All right. Well, I'm going to bring you back down to the virtual green room. Don't leave. I always like to check out with my guests. So I'll see you in about 30 seconds.
All right. Perfect. Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us today for another episode of HCDVCC Connects. And definitely please follow Dr. Temple. We have information here in the chat that you can also get more information about the 4th R. And whether you are a teacher, a parent, or any adult that has interaction with our youth, let's amplify the message that dating violence is a crime, number 1. Number 2, as Dr. Temple talked about, let's model healthier relationships. And number 3, let's encourage our young people to reach out, because we do have a generation of young people who are bright. I know that we could talk about all the other issues that are there, but there are some extremely amazing, bright young women and men. And in order for them to fulfill their purpose and their promise, we have to do our part to have those conversations about what constitutes a healthy relationship. Join us next week, where our guest will be Greta Gardner, as we continue to also observe Black History Month. Greta Gardner is with the Ujima Project out of Washington, and she will be sharing with us about the intersections of domestic violence and the African American community. So see you next Monday. And again, love yourself, whether you're in a relationship, because here's the thing, whether you're in a relationship with someone, the most important relationship is a relationship that you have with yourself. So enjoy yourself. All right. And not next week. Rebecca keeps me on point. That's actually on the 25th. It's a holiday next week. I won't be here. So join us on the 25th with Greta Gardner from the Ujima Project as we talk about the intersections of domestic violence in the African American community. Have an amazing week, and we'll see you on the 25th.